Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior and Community Center. I'm Reed Price, and Something to Talk About for the second year in a row has been named the best of Bainbridge by the Bainbridge Review subscribers, or maybe just people who go online and click a lot. We appreciate it in any event. Um, this program has been going on for a few years since COVID, and what we kind of like to do is talk about everything under the sun, which is why it's called Something to Talk About. Today, we're going to talk with David Harrison about politics, as we have been doing for a few years now, on the first Friday, mostly on the first Friday of every month. I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for sponsoring Something to Talk About. Fieldstone offers independent living up on Rolling Bay. They also have assisted and memory care and day stay and respite programs. There's a lot to offer, and they'd love to describe it to you and walk you around the facility. Call them at 206-594-1010. Randy O'Neill or Sierra Wood can treat you to lunch or dinner when you stop by to visit. Check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. And as you know, we are living on the ancestral homeland of the people of the clear salt water. We are grateful for the Suquamish for uh, being what? Patient teachers of us as we become better stewards of these lands and waters, as they have been stewards of the land and waters of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. David, thank you very much, as usual, for joining us. I appreciate your sharing of your expertise as someone who has been working on public policy and also supporting the democratic process for a long time. And boy, we need to support the democratic process these days, don't we?
I think so. I had and Jake. I was reflecting on Donald Trump's first 4 years and on recent times, and I was thinking for my blog that I'd make up a list of the 10 most unacceptable things. My memory's gone sour. There's so many new unacceptable things. It's hard to remember, some offhand comment from 2018. But in the top 10, certainly, is meeting with 800 top generals, telling them that if they disagreed with him, which they should and are protected in their right to do so, that they could leave the hall and leave their rank with them. And secondly, using it as a chance to tear into Biden. And thirdly, and most unacceptably, is to suggest that he would station troops in the United States as a training ground for their overseas missions. So at some point, you would think that that would be so unacceptable to Susan Collins or Mitch McConnell or John Thune or somebody that they just couldn't bear it anymore. But I think that corner's already been turned. When you have this narrow of a set of margins, then people, especially in the face of retribution, will ally with who they're allied with, and it's an awful time for America. On the other hand, it's an awful time from which we will emerge, and even at this point, there are glimmers that we see that are really exciting. It seems unbearable that there's 3 more years of this, but in a sense, there isn't. There aren't 3 more years because we'll take back the House a year from now. So, in that sense, in terms of the unconstrained, unfiltered, unacceptable Trump, it'll be less so a year from now if we do the right thing. 3 topics today. We're going to go into the Supreme Court a little bit more deeply than we have in the past because the reporting by the press on Supreme Court is just absolutely awful. And we're missing some things that are happening. Then secondly, we'll talk about the shutdown and who might get the blame and how it might end. And then thirdly, I have a proposal for what I'm thinking I'm going to do in terms of support going forward. So that's what we'll do. There's 3.5 issues that we know are going to be before the court in the next term that are either reinforcement of Trump or repudiation. It's important to remember that almost everything that the Supreme Court has done that is being billed as turning into the Trump court uh, are most of it are not findings on the merits of the case. In one area, whether Trump can cut this or that expenditure, that's a standing case. Under the Budget Impoundment Act, it isn't clear that anybody but the General Accounting Office, controlled by Congress, can sue the government for illegal rescission of funds. But there are, after the Supreme Court ruled that nationwide injunctions, or also called universal injunctions, were almost never appropriate. Then we went to a lot of cases where the specific situation has a preliminary injunction.
Like turkey dog.
But there is no nationwide injunction. There are now 100 injunctions against the United States government, stopping them from doing things, but it stops them from doing things to the plaintiffs, not to everybody. So, for instance, the 10 states, and Nick Brown is one of them, decides to sue a federal court over the illegal withholding of certain funds, often because you're not going to get police funds or college funds because you did something on DEI. A lot of those actions are enjoined, and that injunction just protects the litigants. And so, for instance, Republican attorneys general, they're getting those funds withheld too in their states. They're just not suing about it. The interesting thing about those 100 preliminary injunctions is all of them contain findings that plaintiffs will succeed on the merits. So, as I mentioned before to on this podcast, that means that the Supreme Court will either let an appellate ruling stand, or they will overturn what will ultimately be a finding on the merits and reverse the order of the appellate court. And I can promise you that's not going to happen 100 times. There's a lot of things out there that the court will address. Just the surprise is not that so much as the number of times that they've issued a terse order staying a lower court decision, which used to be almost entirely based upon not just on likelihood to succeed on the merits, but on the doctrine of irreparable harm. So what's surprising is when you remove temporary protected status from 500,000 Venezuelans, and then the court says there's no danger of irreparable harm. That's astonishing. As you know, where the court has been most solid and where a lot of these injunctions pertain is on immigration issues over due process, which the court's been clear on, over the First Amendment rights of someone who's here not to be deported because they criticized us in any way, and over temporary protected status. And so there's a lot of waiting around, and there isn't a court case scheduled for this upcoming term that takes any of this head on. There is, as you know, the use of the I'm forgetting the rest of the title, the Alien Terrorism Act of 1788 or whatever it is, and that's out there, and it's not being invoked and used by Trump because that is stayed by some local courts by some district courts. But the reason why you're not hearing a lot about that is Trump can proceed with deportation without calling this or that gang a terrorist organization. So it doesn't stop him from deporting people. But the court is been pretty good at making sure that potential deportees are afforded a basic set of due process rights. So we'll see about where that goes. But there are 3 cases where we know the Supreme Court's going to do something. It will be very interesting. Those are firings of the Federal Reserve board member Lisa Cook, tariffs, and birthright citizenship. So let me say for a minute the other things you could think that they might work on. Doge, there's been a lot of cases over Doge exercising unconstitutional, legal, and inappropriate powers. They'll be around, but the court isn't going to accept a big blockbuster case on Doge now that Elon is going back to Tesla. Also, as I said, they're not going to accept a case directly on the merits of illegal actions, rescinding funds without utilizing the Budget Impoundment Act. They're not going to do that because they have already ruled 6-3 that there's no standing of the aggrieved party who would otherwise have gotten money. So the standing is entirely an offense against the Congress for Trump usurping their constitutional powers. And if they don't, back when Nixon did that, Republicans and Democrats sued him because they believed in those powers. And to be fair, at that time, there wasn't much Nixon could do to him. I worked for a Republican governor at that time, and Nixon wanted to come visit Michigan. And we worked long and hard to figure out a reason why our boss wouldn't be there. Turned out he had an important consultation in Ontario. So sometimes that happens. But in this case, the Congress doesn't look like Congress is. They're fighting over rescission, and Susan Collins, it says every day as chair of the Appropriations Committee how awful it is that Trump's illegally rescinding things, but so far it hasn't been. That could have even been used as the shutdown argument. We'll sign a budget bill if you stop illegally rescinding funds. The reason I didn't use that as a shutdown argument is healthcare is a better shutdown argument. Rescinding funds is too technical of an argument for the American people. So we're back to the 3 things the Supreme Court will do. On birthright citizenship, the class action has been certified. The Trump administration is not moving forward to deport or not serve citizens who they think shouldn't be citizens. We're just frozen right now. The class has been certified twice. So they're going to hear that case. They've avoided it so far. They could, you need 4 votes to hear a case. They could just not hear it and the appellate order would stand, which says the clear meaning of the constitutional amendment that was done right after the Civil War is that these children who were born in America are citizens. That's the clear meaning. You don't have to go to originalism or whatever other theory if you have a clear, unvarnished meaning, and the court could decide not to hear it, but I think they'll hear it. And then I think they'll vote 6-3 against Trump's position. Anything could happen. Clarence Thomas said the other day that precedent is overrated. So who knows? But I think that's the case. I actually think he was not referring to this so much as his deep desire that that the 14th Amendment, Fifth Amendment, so forth, not be used to protect the rights of gay citizens. I think that's the big pea under his mattress. The second case is they have agreed to hear the case of Lisa Cook, who Trump fired from her role in the Federal Reserve as a member of the board of the Federal Reserve. That'll be interesting. Here again, there's a prior history that's interesting. First, Lisa Cook, the press originally said she had two separate applications for a federally guaranteed loan, both listed the separate properties as principal residences. You could have a case where even if that was proven, that the court would say that Trump would not have the legal authority to fire her. And that may well be Kavanaugh's position. Kavanaugh, for a long time, against all the commissioners that have been fired, Consumer Protection Bureau, and all the commissioners that Trump has fired, the court has ruled that certain constraints put on the president's appointment and the executive branch by Congress unconstitutionally limit the president's authority. It's very unlikely to say that with regard to the Federal Reserve. Kavanaugh has argued this would make him the fifth vote with Coney Barrett and the Chief Justice and the three liberals. Kavanaugh has argued that the Federal Reserve occupies a special position, not subject to peremptory presidential firing. So unless he can figure out a way to change his mind on that, then the good guys will win 5-4. Tariffs is interesting. I don't know how many lawyers think that Trump has ever had the authority. I mean, a lot of the authority for setting tariffs rests with the Congress. So I don't know if anybody thinks he's had the authority. Remember that he's used emergency powers in some of these cases, national security threats. So his argument for assaulting the Canadians was always fentanyl, which is a lie. There is no fentanyl threat from the North. So the court will may well uphold the special appellate court on trade. I don't see how they could not uphold them on the basics of whether Trump is appropriately exercising his powers. But there's a lot of other things Trump could do on tariffs outside of the way he's done it. So it will be seen as a loss for Trump, but it won't take him out of the tariff picture. So we'll hear these three courts cases in the next 3 or 4 months, and it will be seen, at least two of the three, as a rebuke of Trump's exercise of powers. And then some of these other individual cases will be upheld. So there'll be a fair number of places where Trump is rebuked. He always knew that. This is not a surprise. He doesn't think that he's going to win all these cases. He's trying to scare the courts, and he's trying to flood the zone. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that. Every time he says he's going to do something, liberals and progressives across America blanch, but we need to do a better job of sorting out what he can do or won't do and what he will do and can do. So that's my report on the court. Questions, thoughts, insights on any of these matters?
Feel free to unmute and drop in any comments you might have. Do you think that there might be any action on some of the tussles he's had with Illinois and California and Oregon about deployment of ICE or the reserves?
It's interesting because I also understood posse comitatus to mean you could station U.S. troops in the states. Although I was in DC in '68, I was very happy to see the 82nd Airborne, and they were camped out in the traffic circle in front of my apartment house because there were fires all over the city. So I don't understand um, where the constitutional arguments come and go, but the courts certainly haven't stopped him yet. So I remember they're not doing arrests for all the hype about how they're fixing America. They're really basically helping staff their assistance to the police.
It sounds like that's what at least 90% of what they're doing, plus just showing off, but
Yeah,
and probably ticking off
and maybe
military
providing
people.
and maybe providing a little security for ICE. So I think it's not going to be blocked by the courts. That's what I think. I don't understand why not. Yes, Tom.
I think what they're doing, is a public relations war. They don't really care what happens. All they want to do is get the credit for the action that they've made. And that's how they're keeping their people interested. And the Democrats, unless they counteract, they look bad. And,
I
that's
don't know what to, they're fooling. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, the other thing, the California governor today said if Trump withholds the funding from the universities, that he would withhold state funding if Trump withheld federal funding. And I think that's, a big part of the answer. You have to hit them where they live. Like when they're talking about going
Withhold
into,
state funding from the universities.
Actually, I think what he was doing was saying, if you cut these deals with the federal government that they're asking you to do,
I
in
see.
order to keep your funds coming from the federal government, I'm going to cut off state funding because
right,
I don't think you should make these deals with the devil.
right. Um, anyway, that's what
That's
worries
interesting.
me. I just he's doing things and saying things and making pronouncements that may be counteracted, but nobody knows it. And if you don't know it, they control. That's why they want to control the media. If you don't see it or hear it, it didn't happen. And
I
that's
think
what the
they,
Democrats, where the Democrats just keep taking the pounding and looking bad.
well, I think there's a difference of opinion among Democratic mayors and governors over what you should do because in these cities, what they've been doing is saying, well, our crime rate has been reduced by X% over the last 10 years, and that's true. But citizens in those cities know that if they walk down certain streets, they're going to feel uncomfortable. So Trump has the edge on how that's communicated, and notably in Tennessee, of course, it's a Republican governor that ordered asked for the troops against a Democratic mayor, so that could always happen. I think Tom's right that Democrats could be more strategic than they have been, or in some cases, as with with Gavin Newsom, just sort of countering Trump's whole shtick. But I think, in particular, the law firms and universities who have stood up to Trump have prevailed. The reason why universities in the face of that cut deals is they know there are ways that they could be punished that are not protectable. So you could say Harvard will eventually sign a deal and they'll spend all sorts of money on post-secondary education for non-college bound students, career and technical education. So that will happen. And they'll say, well, at least it's worth spending this on. But the bad part about it is they have to do that is a quasi admission of guilt on something like DEI, which they should never do. Other questions, thoughts? As we head toward the budget shutdown, we have the same issues. Democrats aren't quite sure how to message the fact that they're not providing the votes to keep the government open. And as you know, 6 months ago, Schumer did provide the votes. So the first big question becomes, who is to blame? Who will the voters blame? So right now there's a big messaging war over whose fault it is, and the winner of the Total Liar Award of the Year is Mike Johnson. He'll say anything to the camera, at least Thune occasionally is slightly nuanced, but he's a creature of the Senate. At any rate, there's a poll now, New York Times, 33% of Americans blame both sides, 26% blame Trump, 19% blame Democrats, and 21% don't really know. That's good. That's fine. I wasn't going to be worried if we were 26 and Trump was 19, just because I think the elections are 14 months off and there will be so many intervening issues that to find an independent voter who was swayed against the Democratic congressional candidate because Hakeem Jeffries' caucus didn't vote to keep the government open. I just wasn't worried. But at any rate, if you are worried about that, you can be less worried unless the Democrats start losing that PR war. I think the choice of healthcare was outstanding because Republicans know that with the loss of Obamacare subsidies, that the increase in healthcare costs for Obamacare recipients would be huge, and some of those are their constituents, and they don't want that to happen. So they chose an issue that Americans could understand much better than empowerment. And the biggest problem is that the number one articulator of that position is Chuck Schumer. I've said on this show before that was the case in early Trump days with Harry Reid. Senate chooses majority leaders not for their public communication ability, but for their ability to run the caucus in the Senate. It's too bad that there isn't a way for Democrats to have a spokesman. So you just have to accept that it's Newsom and Murphy and Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer, and that's just the way it's going to be for a while. And we have to work our way through it. How will the shutdown end? Three possibilities. Not anytime soon, but the market's up today, the Dow is. The market could be tired of it. If market gets tired of it and billionaires start losing money, then it gets annoying to them and they mention it. And so, but that's not going to happen in the short term. Secondly, interestingly, political pressure from constituents. So that can go in either direction. You could get people in, well, it wouldn't happen in Washington because both Cantwell and Murray would stay with Schumer to the end. But in some of those states, you could get political pressure on a senator. And that would be true of Ossoff and Warnock in Georgia. Not keeping the government open would be an unpopular thing for them to do. And eventually they could say to Schumer, ouch, please stop, figure out a deal. So that could happen. But Schumer's not in much danger. He got 45, 46. And that means those mostly guys, those senators, decided at the outset that he could do this. It was a caucus position. Fetterman voted against it, a couple others. He's going to stay at the 41 he needs, but that might make him more susceptible to what Jeanne Shaheen's trying to do. The outgoing senator from New Hampshire wants a deal. And what the deal would be agreeing on a date certain and a method to certainly address Obamacare subsidies, though not in this instant. It would have to be some way to prove to Democrats that it'll happen before the end of this season. And then Democrats would agree to cap some of the upside levels. Because right now you can get a small subsidy if you make $200,000 a year. It's a pretty broad subsidy. It goes down the more money you make, but Democrats, the compromise may well be Thune's got to figure out a way to make it certain or do it now. Shaheen finds enough votes to accept certain caps on the subsidy levels, and they agree to open the government when that deal is cut. So I think Thune has been very careful to single out Democrats like Shaheen for their bipartisan approaches. So I think he's looking for that to come. How soon it comes, I don't know. Questions on uh, closing the government?
I'll just jump in here and say that in support of the idea of healthcare being valuable as a negotiating tactic, we're starting to get reports of, the new year coming up, and people are getting notices saying that whatever their insurance was will not be there next year because the insurance company is stopping those programs, clearly because they can't afford to do them under the market that they see coming. There's a lot of talk about, I know that AOC and Bernie Sanders put out a video saying for many people, their premiums are going to double. We're talking next year, folks. And so, that's got a lot of people worried. They're calling the center to ask, what can we do about this? What's going to happen? My Kaiser program is going away.
That's
Uh,
right. Kaiser is one of them. I've heard a couple of people that have Kaiser, they've canceled. They said you won't have it next year.
You won't have that plan. There will be another Kaiser plan, but it's probably going to have to set up with different costs and values because the support that was expected from the federal government is not going to be there.
And
So
the price will go up. I have one other comment, and when you look at what the Republicans have been doing and how they've treated, the government and the laws, and you look at the election coming up, and we're all looking at the Democrats are going to take back the House. Do you think that Trump, number one, will they allow the election to go on? Number two, will they allow the votes to be counted? And number three, will they certify anybody? They got a congresswoman now that's elected, I think, in Arizona, and they're not swearing her in. I mean, how do they get away with that? It's and what's going to happen? I don't
don't
I
have
don't
the
have any
powers that you
positive thoughts about it.
they don't have the powers that you just described. The states control the election counting and process. Almost all the swing states have Democratic secretaries of states that run elections. One of the great stories of 2020 is Republican registrars like Raffensperger standing up. So I don't think the country would stand for what you're describing, but the good news, the practical answer is there is no federal government control certifying elected people to be elected. So what you're describing in Arizona would be something that Arizona Republicans are seeking to do. Courts have done a pretty good job of intervening. So in North Carolina, with that really messy case, the right thing eventually happened. So I think I'm not worried about the election being stolen. There is another way of stealing, and let's get to that. It's unprecedented to have Trump is not only so first there's the Texas +5. The reason why Trump worked so hard to get a redistricting in Texas is they don't think they're going to win either. They think, well, will hold is the traditional off-season recovery by the other party. Think how well we did in 2018 when we got 30 seats or so back. So they think that will happen, and just in case it's close, they're trying to change as many districts as they can. First, don't be so sure about +5. When you disrupt districts like that, you could slip one or two. So you wouldn't want to be necessarily certain that you could do that. Second, Gavin Newsom will win in the response. That is, they'll do a Democratic +5, which has the same problems as the Republican +5 in Texas. So now you start saying, what else can you do? And Republicans did a +1 in Missouri. Indiana Republicans don't want to do it. And they're already not in great position on finding more states. And the Democrats are working hard to find counter states, all of which are difficult. So I don't think that's going to be a fertile ground for them. In the meantime, the generic congressional vote is now +4, so or certainly +3. So I think things look good. Not to say that we aren't suffering horrible damage to the Republic and to humans while this is all happening. I would say this: I started getting unusual calls. So I got a call, maybe some of you did, from the woman whose name I'm forgetting, who's running for state senate from the 26th state legislative district, and that's the #1 race for the Senate from Gig Harbor. And there's going to be an event on Bainbridge to support her that Drew Hansen and Christine Rolfes are putting together, because it's the targeted race and we have no such problems in our district, the 23rd. Now you got a call the other day from Patty Murray, who was trying to get table captains for her tennis shoes event, which is annual. And years ago, I was the table captain when Al Gore spoke. And parenthetically, it was after he lost the election. And if he had given the speech during the election that he gave to us, he would have won the election. He seemed like a stiff during his candidacy, but he was great when we saw him. At any rate, I picked up the phone. Didn't know who it was. She says, "This is Patty Murray." I said, "Patty Murray, I should be the 107,000th person that you call. Go outside, do something. Don't be calling me." So I made a donation, but I said, this too will pass. I know it's awful, but it's
Yeah, I know
pass.
that Emily Randall has also been stumping for.
Yeah,
I think her
right.
name is Deb Krishnadasan.
Yeah, there you go. So I said, and so she's a very strong candidate. Emily Randall's not going to get beat. She's our congressperson, and she should be asked when you talk to her why she took $1.5 million in Bitcoin money. But she's a good congressman. Anyway, so I said to Patty Murray, this too will pass. And she said, "David Harrison, you would not believe how crazy this town is right now. It is crazy." So that was the discussion. Then I got a call yesterday from David Domke. As some of you know, David Domke runs the best, I think, political organizing shop in the country. He's a former UW professor, and I've raised a lot of money for David Domke. And he's very good. So we were talking about what's up. And so this is my third appeal. We all have to decide. We can decide to go on doorbell. There's a guy, Ron Antinoia on Bainbridge Island, that went to 5 states for Domke last fall. I mean, he was gone the last 6 weeks before the election. There are a lot of Bainbridge Islanders who get trained and recruited and deployed through Domke, and so good for them. I don't doorbell. I doorbell 10,000 doors when I ran for the legislature 25 years ago. And I'm still sore. But at any rate, doorbell, write postcards. There's all sorts of things we can do. When we donate money, we have to make decisions. So Cindy and I almost never give money directly to candidates just because they're getting so much. They have mammoth amounts of money. We try and give money to Sometimes we'll give money through swing left to a targeted voters, targeted candidates fund, because that raises money before you even know who your candidate's going to be. So the candidate gets nominated by the primary, all of a sudden they get, $500,000 from swing left. That's a good thing. We tend to give money to local organizers in swing states. So North Carolina be an example, Arizona, Nevada, things that we think we're going to win, but we're not sure we're going to win. And you find out who an organizer is. It might be on a issue like choice. In my case, I raised a ton of money for Mi Familia Vota, first in Arizona. Maybe some of you gave to my appeal. Then in Nevada, in both those cases, we won by narrow margins, and you could almost count the Latino voters going to the polls that we had something to do with. And then last year, I went all in on Latino voters in North Carolina, of which there are a lot. And we didn't win because Latinos started moving toward Trump, 40%. So I am for funding local organizing, and I'm for funding David Domke. He's trying to raise $1.5 million in the next 6 weeks. I'm going to do a Zoom session for him. He's deploying 100 or so paid people in total to a Texas congressional district that's up special election, a Tennessee special election, to Virginia, where not only are we going to win a governorship, but we could win both houses of the legislature and therefore be a candidate for redistricting if we have to next year. He's deploying a mess of people to California because we can't lose that redistricting battle. And then he's deploying some people to New Jersey. And he's doing it all now, trying to get traction for a month from now when we win New Jersey and Virginia, and to prepare for next year. So the reason I'm all in on that is I think it's going to turn down. Obviously, there's swing districts we have to win in blue and red states. Michigan, we're fighting over Grand Rapids. There's always the place where urban meets rural or urban meets suburban. But I'm making a pitch for local organizing. And I'm making a pitch for us to curb our despair insofar as we can, and to use a certain studied selective rage about what's happening to our country to motivate us to get back into the fight if we're been on the sidelines.
So David Domke's organization, I don't know if did
It's
you say
called
Common Power?
Yeah.
Power.
Yeah, so that's a training ground for field work is what it is. And
Jake.
I had always thought excuse me, Ed and I both have bad cold.
Yuck.
Well, lucky we're on Zoom then. Hopefully it won't go through the wireless.
No, exactly. So I had always thought from people that I know who are involved with Common Power that it was that what they funded were people to go to different states and knock on doors. So it's more than that.
Well, knock on doors is a big thing. They've done postcards too, but yeah, everything you can do in a state to help is what you're funding if you give money to them. And the essence of it, as you may remember, is our boots, their ground. The biggest single, there's a lot of issues in field organizing now, much more than there was when I was a candidate. People don't want to answer your door. What you're thinking, not necessarily at least, what you're thinking about for your candidate who's a swing congressional candidate, you're thinking about touches. What are the different ways you could come into their head and knocking on doors? As long as you do it right, you're selected, you know where your independents are. A lot of these cases, you have walk-around lists that we pioneered in the 23rd, where you knew houses that there was no sense in going to. You might stop at some Democratic houses to fire them up, and then you knew you had a pretty good idea where your independents were. So that's what Domke does, but not just, they certainly raise money for candidates. They push candidates on positions. They do postcards. They do, but absolutely, they field. Well, when somebody, our boots their ground, they find the local sponsoring organization, and then the full range of duties are defined in concert with those organizations. What I'm saying is, he's as attentive to quality work. Sometimes you get somebody and they'll go doorbell for somebody and they'll say it was awful. The lists were awful. The coordinator didn't know what they were doing. So you don't want that. I mean, you want the best, to the extent you're doing field work, you want the best field work you can possibly get.
Thanks.
Seems to me as though one of the biggest challenges we have in our country right now is that we aren't talking to each other. And so this is a way, if it's done well, to maybe allow a little face-to-face or at least closer direct conversation, the conversations that you have over social media, even with people that you know, at least in my experience, can pretty quickly devolve into exchange of memes, which is not going to get us out of this hole.
So in 2020, in 2000, 25 years ago, I lost by 800 votes running for the state legislature back when the 23rd was a swing district. I lost to Beverly Woods, who was a moderate Republican, decent human being. I knocked on a door. I might have already told you this. I knocked on the door once in Silverdale, suburbs near Silverdale. This woman opened the door, had me come in, and showed me a huge wall chart of me and Beverly and who had sent what brochures and how she had seen us and who was recommending us. She had a big old box on personal visit, and she took out a mark and marked that I had gone. So I told Beverly that I wasn't going to tell her where that house was, to keep my margin. So actually, yeah, I probably had in those 10,000 doors, 1,000 good discussions with people about issues.
Well, then that's reassuring. I've knocked on doors where you've got a cold list and it can be an absolutely horrible experience, but much more recently, having an intelligent list makes all the difference in the world. And sometimes mostly it's the difference that gets people to stop just keeping what they want to themselves, and it pushes them to action. And
I think that's true. It's all about touches. That's another good touch. And you could even have somebody say that it doesn't matter to them, and that could matter to them as a voter. It's all about creating momentum and excitement and energy. Tom,
it's different, locally. Like I had Sarah Blossom come and talk to our walking group at lunch yesterday, and I think the most effective way of campaigning is small groups like coffees or that sort of thing. I ran 6 times in Ohio and got elected 3 times, and ran once here and lost. So, I mean, I know what you're saying, David. I empathize with you and sympathize, and I very, very much appreciate what you're doing here. I listen to you, and you make a lot of sense, and you help me calm myself down. So I appreciate it.
I think this is world's not on fire. I think we have gone through tough times before, and this was a surprise to me. I thought Kamala could pull it off. As you know, I'm very mad at Joe. I think he served us up on a platter, but I think we can, before Trump is gone, we can reseed him. We certainly will next November. So let's go do that.
Shall we leave it there?
Let's do it. See you
Oh,
next
wait,
month.
it sounds like Bonnie
Wait,
wants to
Bonnie.
get it.
Yeah, I just, back at the beginning, when you were talking about the meeting with the generals, another aspect of that that was so upsetting was anti-women, anti-color, black, whatever, any color that wasn't white, and making that as it's going to be a bunch of white fit men. I mean, that was terribly upsetting. And then
Yeah,
it
it
had the
was.
two people that they had fired. One was the head of the Navy, and a
Yeah,
woman,
a black man,
a black man, and a woman. Yeah.
yeah, you'd think that that would be getting noticed. You think that it's a new zone. He's in a zone himself. Any other senator or congressman addressing the military and saying those things would be excoriated. He's got his own
Yeah.
rules game. It's just awful.
Yeah, well, and the secondary consequences of this are not known. The people who are listening to this, who are then going to go to the polls, uh,
Well, I don't think it's a winner for him in terms
no,
of
exactly. It's not a winner. Jake, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say the most heartening thing I've heard that came out of that generals meeting was a piece that David and Fran Corton collaborated on for David Corton's blog. And the gist of it was that, thank heaven, the gift that this was from Hegseth was that he did this in front of everybody, all the generals together in one place, hearing the same thing, in a place where in general, no pun intended, they can't like email to each other and text each other because of security. You just don't know who's listening and who knows what. But in this case, he laid himself out in front of everybody for all of them, and we have no idea the conversations and the whispering and the coffee chat that's going to result. But
Yeah.
at least everybody saw it.
I'm
I think
hoping
that's right.
we can get David and Fran on one of these podcasts to talk about that.
Yeah,
One of the things you might want to look at is Mattis's statement for former Secretary of Defense. It's excellent. You know,
One
he's
last thing, I want to make a shout out to Beulah Downing. Beulah was on the board when I first got involved in the senior center, and she was a great board member.
And she's here watching. And so is Marcy and Jake and Ed and Lawrence and Bonnie and Tom. Thank you all for being here.
thank
David
you.
Harrison is the former or is the founder and executive director of Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington. Thank you again for sharing your wisdom, and it's been a lively conversation, and I hope to talk again with more positivity next month.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, David.
You're all welcome, and see you